this episode of Peephole Pictures, we're looking at Let My Puppets Come from 1976.
Well, there's only one way to make that kind of money in 24 hours. Make a porno flick. A dirty movie. You clean up.
But we don't know nothing about movie making.
With some technical assistance, you can put together a dynamite fuck film. What you need is lots of raunchy sex. Plenty of sucking and fucking.
Yeah, maybe even a plot.
Terrific, Red. Nah. You need plenty of hardcore sex. Penetration. Moaning and groaning. Now.
You know, I have a whole list of films I want to talk about on this show, and it's just a coincidence that this happens to be the second time in a row that back-to-back we got the same director for a film, because originally I had Philip Marshak with Intimate Lessons and Dracula Sucks, and last time we talked about The Devil and Miss Jones, directed by the great Gerard Damiano, and here we are talking about another Gerard Damiano film, Let My Puppets Come. A notorious film in its own right, a film that has seemingly gotten a bit of a revival with the latest Vinegar Syndrome release. I should say latest in kind of quotations. I mean, I guess they call it relative, but that Blu-ray is a couple years old now. But either way, this was a film that I think for the most part now, I may not be completely correct on the history here, but I think a large part of the film was lost for some time. A lot of the versions that were previously available, or at least the version that was widely available, came from the Caballero DVD, which the runtime on that ran about 45, 50 minutes or so. And online, I mean, on the IMDb trivia, I have no way to verify this, but it would probably make sense, is that this was originally made to be sort of like, let me just read what it says here. According to a report in Variety, September 15th, 1976, the film was originally created as a short subject to book in conjunction with Damiano's feature, The Story of Joanna, from 75. It was expanded to feature length before release, however. Even though, it's a bit of weird wording, because Story of Joanna came up previously. So, I mean, I think the idea probably would... even then, I don't know. I mean, Story of Joanna is a far more serious film, of course, than Let My Puppets Come. It's actually kind of funny, the sort of range in talking about this film in conversation with other of Damiano's work, in terms of, like, you know, The Devil and Miss Jones or The Story of Joanna. Because this is a film that is tapping into a far more jovial and sillier side of Damiano that I love to see. I think he's a filmmaker who is able to do so many different kinds of films and so many different kinds of tones, and using hardcore sex to really kind of show these off. It can be either very erotic or very sad or very funny in this case. So this film is something close to... I've heard some comparisons to The Producers, but I don't think that really applies here, more so than you have these puppets here. We have what the hell were their names? Let me get the names up, actually. Well, I don't have their names, but they're running this company, Creative Concept Systems and Procedures Brothers Unlimited Incorporated. They say that in song multiple times, but I should say they sing that in songs multiple times. Anyways, they have X amount of time. They got to get some money to some mobsters. So they're like, what are we gonna do? And they're like, you know what, man, we got limited time. What are we gonna do? We're gonna make an adult film, and hijinks ensue from there. We got many ridiculous comedy skits, many commercials, many musical numbers, all of which are through puppets. And it's an interesting film in that exactly what kind of audience this was even for, because this is far more of just this is something that you probably see more of in a contemporary sort of widely seen theatrical film, even with some of the full frontal nudity that's in this, because there's not a lot of human actors in this besides a couple, but one of the women does get fully nude. But I think of, like, you know, I mean, the obvious comparisons are there in terms of films that are more widely seen that weren't as sexual. You know, Meet the Feebles, Peter Jackson's film, The Happy Time Murders. You know, taking these concepts and doing them all with puppets. And because this was 1976, this actually was the same year of the original airing of The Muppet Show. So, interesting coincidence there. And actually, I believe the Alice in Wonderland musical was also 76 as well, the X-rated musical. Let me actually pull it up here because it'd be an interesting kind of tangent right there. 1976. That is correct. And that film will be talked about at some point on the show. Just recently got that DVD. But anyways, we'll be talking about that when we talk about that. We're talking about Let My Puppets Come. And the big obvious in this film is just the whole ridiculous kind of idea of it all. We have, you could have the same kind of idea as a silly kind of dumb comedy with just some guys. And what do? We're going to make an adult film. If you listen to the Cozy Corner of Cinema, I talked about a film, The Amateurs, from 2006 or 7, I believe. And that's a comedy, but that's not nearly as lampoonish as this film is, because that film is more about, it's a very heartfelt, very warm film about these people coming together for this one kind of passion project. And in that film, it's not even really about any kind of monetary gain. It's just, can we do this? And here, it's very silly, very goofy. And one of the things that I always kind of attribute with Damiano is his really good comedic timing, in the way that, when I say comedic timing, I would say the way that he's able to direct comedy. I've always said that with Deep Throat, the strongest part of that film is Harry Reams' performance, because Harry Reams is so naturally charismatic and so naturally funny that when he's delivering this dialogue to Linda Lovelace and to the nurse in that film, whose name I can't remember right now, I apologize. It all works well. Damiano he's able to really kind of get this really kind of quick dialogue, these fast kind of lines out, sorry. And here that happens a lot. My favorite sequences in this film undoubtedly was all the stuff early on when they're at the meeting. They're trying to really think up an idea of what do we do, and there's a lot of dialogue bouncing back and forth. There's a lot of puns, man. There are so many. If you took a shot at every pun in this film, you would have liver failure at the end of it, and it's not even a long film. Because actually, also speaking of which, before I get into what I was saying, is that with Caballero DVD being all about 45 to 50 minutes, the Vinegar Syndrome release, which is what I watched it off of, and this isn't a review or the Blu-ray, I'm just saying that's how I watched it, I think comes in at about 75 minutes or so, or 75 minutes roughly. I don't have the Blu-ray right here on me. It's in the other room. I just looked it up right here. So I don't know when this other footage was discovered, but there are definitely times throughout where you can see that a lot of the footage is a lot scratchier. It's a lot fuzzier. And you can see, I was skimming through the 45-minute version, or this one's actually just 40 minutes that I have here that's for reference sake, and even skimming through, the specific sequences I don't totally remember, but there are a couple big ones, like the big kind of musical number in the middle when when there's some shots on the beach and people running around, like none of that's in there. So you're cutting it down from 75 minutes to 40 minutes. But I don't think that that's even necessarily a bad thing, because this is just a series of skets. What am I talking about? I might say sketches and skits. It's sketch. That's a new word for you. It's mostly just a series of sketches and skits where you have these commercials with with real kind of human actors, like you have even people like Al Goldstein making a cameo in the film, and actually it's funny with his opening kind of credit when they're going through the people in the film. They have a little screw that comes out and reveals as Al and the Goldstein from Screw Magazine, of course, and with those opening credits, right off the bat, it's just pun after pun after pun. It's crediting the puppets as, who do you got here? You got Clark Gable, you got Anthony Quinn, you got Clitoris Leachman, of varying degrees of quality. Comedy is so subjective that you're either going to groan and roll your eyes, or you're going to be laughing at these kind of ridiculous sort of, names, man. But it's that tone that's right off the bat that really kind of puts you into this world. Because, even you're not going to watch this as as some sort of adult film, because I guess it's a strange kind of unclassifiable film in a way, because you're not going to watch this as an adult film. You're not going to probably watch this as a straight comedy, because it does kind of go off and do these quote unquote hardcore segments. And I mean, you could laugh at the absurdity of it all, the fact these puppets are having this, the sex that is shot like an adult film. But even like the only real nudity in the film, you have this one actor, what the hell was her name? I had it right here a second ago. If only I could read my own handwriting. Penny Nichols, who is completely naked for an extended sequence that goes on for a while. And what I was talking about before is that, for one, if this was made in part, or if the idea of this was to be attached to the story of Joanna, that'd be interesting, because the tones are so different. But it's not, I mean, it'd be one thing if you're attaching it to another film that happened to have been, shot around. Like I was talking about with Erotic Memoirs of Male Chauvinist Pig, that you have that short, I forgot the hell the name of it was. You can go back and listen to that episode, but that was attached to, that may have been actually attached to the story of Joanna. You'd have to go back and listen to that. I don't remember what that was attached to. But here, it's interesting in that as a short, it's one thing. As like a 20-minute thing, because you're laughing at the spectacle of it all. You're laughing at the idea of it, of just these puppets having sex, these ridiculous kind of scenarios. But I think a big problem with the film for me is that I think the first part of it is really good. It's a really good, it's a solid, funny setup. The dialogue is flowing really well. The dialogue delivery as well is flowing very well. It's very quick, and there's a lot of moments that kind of, caught me off guard and was making me laugh. I think by the time the middle came around is where I started to become less interested, where the puppetry work is very solid throughout. It all looks good, but once you get over that general hump, no pun intended, of the fact that this is all puppets, I don't think that there's not much to be desired in terms of the comedy is not really consistent. The music is very good. The first kind of musical bit with the three executives doing their song and dance is very catchy. It's very fun, but it does kind of trail off for too long, where even though they are puppets, it starts to become a bit less interesting. Which, funnily enough, some of the stuff they were filming on the real streets of New York was funny. The way they got around not having to show the bottom half of them. Early on, we have a nice close-up shot of one of the puppets kind of walking with the camera, not quite attached to him, but close up enough that you were not seeing anything below the belt. But then later on, I was laughing because there's one part where you have two of the puppets who are walking up the stairs, and they have the World Trade Center in the background. But the angle is so bizarre because they set the camera down like on the gravel, or on the, not even the gravel, but on like the cement ground, and it's such a bizarre angle because like the ground is taking up like most of the screen, or at least like half the screen, and it's just like, it's such anything they could do to get around the fact of not having to show the bottom of these puppets, to have them kind of awkwardly walk. But then later on, it's bizarre because then you have a sequence with one of the I guess I won't give it away if you're concerned about spoilers, but then you have a dancing puppet, which is a full body thing, so it's like, it's just strange the way they chose that shot. It's really bizarre the way they did it, because it's like, oh, we're gonna hide it, but then later on they just don't. And even the design of the puppets is very interesting. I actually really like how they all look. Some of them are like a fully fabric all around, or fabric, that's not a word, fully fabric all around puppets. They look, you can feel the texture of it, but then there are other ones, and I don't, believe it or not, I don't really know a lot about puppetry, so if somebody's a puppet expert out there, God bless you, you're gonna know more than I will, and you can correct me, go for it. That's totally good. But some of the puppets, they had like hard masks attached to them. Like, you could see that the texture of the mask was different than the fabric of the rest of the body. And then in one sequence was completely bizarre. I don't know how often they do this, but it was like they had a guy who was sitting or standing behind the puppet, and his hands you could see, I mean, it was very clearly human hands in a glove, but I think you could see like his arm at one point. He had a hairy arm, and you could see that he attached the shirt to the arm. So it's funny how, in high definition watching this, you can just see these like little imperfections, which I think kind of adds to the charm of it, honestly, even though, you're watching this in 76, you're not going to be staring too closely at the dude's arm, man, you're gonna be like watching the film that you're probably not even, maybe depending on the film print, it might not even be a very good film print. Which, looking at previous versions of this, I mean, it's a really good restoration. They really cleaned it up. Um, and you're able to kind of notice these details a lot more. But really, it's just the middle portion of the film that I really think kind of brings it all down, where it's funny and it is enjoyable and it's fun to watch, but there are just those long segments that really kind of go on, and even with this being like a puppet kind of adult film, it never fully commits. It does feel more of just a comedy that happens to have these I mean, quote unquote, like puppet nudity and stuff, and you have, just some like ridiculous sequences, which I think, to the benefit of Damiano as a filmmaker, the fact that these are all puppets, you're able to do much sillier and much crazier things than you would with human actors. Because there's one part where one of the ladies gets like the penis cut off that's attached to her, and then you have like scenes of bestiality, which is very bizarre. The fact that they're thinking up ideas for an adult film for a porno, and the first one that comes to mind is you have a dog having sex with this woman, and the dog talks, and it's even got some wild dialogue like, "I'm attractive, I'm a purebred cocker." It's like, oh my gosh, man, what is going on here? If somebody walked in the room, I would not be able to explain this to them, nor would I even try to. Because it's just so silly, and that silly tone, I think, for the most part, is consistent throughout. I just think that because it goes off and does these other things, that the musical sequence in the middle, the long sequence with Penny Nichols and the puppet, it goes off track in a way where it doesn't. It really starts to overstay its welcome at times. Now, when you got to the actual ending of the film, I thought it all it's funny. In the film, they're talking about, we have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end, and I'm thinking the beginning and the ending I thought were the strongest parts of this, because even the way they wrap it up at the end is actually pretty humorous as well. Because Damiano himself has two cameos in the film. He has a great kind of moment at the very beginning of the film. He's just there, stereotypical New Yorker ordering a hot dog. There's a puppet that's there, and he doesn't even question it. It's not even fully a reality, at least the idea that I get, that it's not even fully a reality where puppets are totally integrated with society. But he does have kind of a look like, I'm not going to question it, whatever, it's a puppet there, why not? And then at the end of the film, the way that they try to, they try to make it seem like they're at the Academy Awards, but they shot this in like clearly some just some room, and Damiano's on screen. He's having fun, but that's part of the fun to it as well. They're clearly not trying to make it look like a professional set. They're just making it look like Damiano sitting in front of the camera, and the way they give him the wrong letter at first, like, those moments are really funny. And I think in a vacuum, there are a lot of really funny and ridiculous parts to this film, but it is enjoyable overall. Though that's the thing with it, is that when you're able to, the first 5-10 minutes, when you're able to kind of get over the wildness of what you're watching. And when I say wildness, I'm not even saying wild like I can't believe this exists. It's more like this is such a specific kind of film to make, and such a bold film for Damiano to make as well. I don't know the full story, but I know this was inspired, or at least in parts, or at least had some inspiration by it was the erotic puppet play Kumquats, from, I don't know what year that was, 71 maybe, I'm not totally sure. And actually on the Blu-ray there is an interview with I think one of the guys involved with the play, the musical. I didn't get an opportunity to. I mean, I wasn't doing a review on the Blu-ray. I'm just talking about the film, so I'm not too worried about that front. But this is one of a kind in the way that they didn't really do anything like this after the fact. Even with this being inspired by something like Kumquats, where, I mean, I mentioned before, like Meet the Feebles, and the Happy Time Murders, but the fact that this is grouped in with the adult films of the time, made by an adult film director, and even, when you have like Al Goldstein in it. And I've seen some people say that, or I've seen some sources, well, not sources, but I've seen a couple listings online of saying that Annie Sprinkle was in this, but I didn't see her in this, unless I missed it or something. Because there's not a lot of humans in the film, and Annie Sprinkle has a very kind of distinct look to her. So unless I missed it, or there's something I didn't see, I really don't know. And actually, funnily enough, is that even the credits for, which, by the way, this does actually have end credits, which is something that's not really kind of typical in a lot of these films, or a lot of adult films, I should say. But a lot of the puppeteers, I think, also did the voices, but also were probably using pseudonyms, because when you look up a lot of the names for this film, it's really just one-time things. This is just like a one-time thing for them. A one-time thing. I can't say that word. So I think it's a case of just maybe people who are probably more known for their puppeteering and maybe even voice acting. I don't know, not wanting to be put on credit for this, because I mean, there's not. I mean, the only real kind of standouts that you would recognize is, like I said, you have Damiano in the film and Al Goldstein in a small role. And then you have actually Luis de Jesus, who, if any of you have seen Bloodsucking Freaks, he was in that film as well. And he did some adult films as well in the 70s and 80s. Or actually, I think maybe in the 80s he just did that. I'm not exactly sure. He did like Fantasex Island, and I don't think I've actually even seen him in any. I guess he was in Ewok Return of the Jedi. Go figure that. Moving on up in the world from Let My Puppets Come and Bloodsucking Freaks to Return of the Jedi. But actually, he did Let My Puppets Come before he did Bloodsucking Freaks. Actually, it was the same year. Look at that. I thought it was 79. Oh my gosh. Originally credited as he played the Anal Dwarf in the film The Anal Dwarf from 71. I've not seen that one, but perhaps that can be viewed as a curiosity piece. At some point. And actually, what I was mentioning about before, funnily enough, speaking about the first kind of scene with the lady having sex with the dog, they actually do a funny thing with the fish later, and I mean, it's such an obvious joke, but it's actually funny what they do. It's just nonsense, man. I mean, look, with a film like this, there's a couple big things to get out of it. Number one is that the idea is funnier than the execution. I don't think it completely works, and I think that once the laugh factor is kind of not the laugh factor. Once the big kind of, oh my gosh, it's a puppet adult film. Once that part is out of the way and you're watching the film, it's becomes substantially less interesting. But the other big thing I got out of it is really just an increased love and respect of Damiano as a filmmaker. What I was mentioning last time when I was talking about The Devil and Miss Jones is that I won't get too much into it again because I talked about it more in that episode. But truly, the range that he had in this period of time, because even I don't even know if I mentioned Legacy of Satan from '74, which is, to my knowledge, just a horror film. I've never actually seen that film. I don't think it's an adult film, to my knowledge. But funny enough, Sandra Peabody from Last House was in that. That's crazy. But just the wide. He could have easily just been the Deep Throat guy. He could have just been the guy who made Deep Throat and maybe made a couple other things. But the fact that he was so confident in what he was doing, and the fact that everything I've seen by him, I've liked. I mean, granted, he's done a ton of films, so I truly can't give a full kind of wide-ranged opinion on him. But at least just for this period of time, for these short couple years, the variety and the range of the kinds of films he was making, I truly do think that Damiano is, if you're looking at the Mount Rushmore of adult filmmakers, just adult filmmakers, I think he would have to be on there because of how confident, how smart, how funny, how dramatic of a filmmaker he was in terms of the films he was making. You know, I can't speak for himself as a person, nor will I even try to, but because that'd be inappropriate. I mean, I'm just judging the man's films, not judging the man. I don't, you know. And actually, Skinflix is another one from '78 that I wanted to watch as well. And Odyssey: The Ultimate Trip, I think actually might be on my list to review. So maybe that'll come up at some point. But this film really just made me appreciate him as a craftsman, as a filmmaker, just so much more. It's a fun film to watch. It's maybe not as like repeatedly laugh out loud funny. It's not quite as extreme and as wild as maybe you think it is. It's not even as extreme as like Team America, which I know that film was like, you know, all marionettes and stuff. But I mean, that one sequence in that film with the two marionettes having sex is far more extreme than anything in this film. Besides, you have a couple shots of like just some fake kind of puppet genitalia as opposed to real puppet genitalia. I know I didn't phrase it the best way. But man, it's such a cool, such a unique, one of the kind film, and just the fact that he was doing this really kind of at his height is just so fascinating and so cool, man. This is just a cool film. I mean, what can I say about it? It's Let My Puppets Come. It's a solid, funny, silly, catchy film. It didn't really even talk about music all that much, but yeah, that the music early on when they're singing, they're singing at the in the boardroom. It's all just solid, man. So I mean, just more solid work from Damiano. I really can't repeat that point enough. Just the kinds of films he was making, and really kind of the lasting legacy he had by making such a wide array of films in such a short period of time. I'd be very interested to see some of his later work into the 80s. I actually just recently picked up from 84 Throat 12 years later, which I don't know if I think that Blu-ray might be out of print. I think that might be actually kind of expensive now, but I actually got that pretty cheap. But that's got a really good cast in it. I'm very curious to watch that at some point, and maybe I'll even talk about that in the show. That might actually be on the list. I'm not sure. But 1976, it's Let My Puppets Come. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, man. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. It doesn't all work. But gosh, man, Damiano was one of a kind. We raise our glasses to him. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Appreciate you guys listening. Maybe the next one will be another Damiano episode. Maybe not. We'll see when we see. So thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time.